NBC Montana is continuing our coverage of the murky legal area that is corner crossing. And today I'm joined by Amanda Eggert with the Montana Free Press, who wrote an in-depth three-part series covering the subject. And Amanda, can you tell us some of your biggest takeaways from your reporting?
I think one of the most interesting things I found is just how many corner locked acres there are across the West, and including in Montana. So about 900,000 acres, according to one analysis. So that's almost the size of Glacier National Park. That's a huge volume of public land that has this kind of murky access situation where hunters and other recreationists are kind of in this gray area where they might try to cross at their own risk and maybe risk a civil trespassing charge.
Interesting. And during your reporting, did you notice any differences in the Montana stance on corner crossing versus Wyoming stance before the Elk Mountain case?
I think the most interesting thing I found there was that Wyoming's Attorney General, which is kind of like the top lawyer for the state, had issued guidance saying corner crossing was not going to be treated as a criminal trespassing charge in the state of Wyoming. And that's something that I tried to sort out in the course of my reporting with Montana to figure out if Montana's Attorney General had issued any guidance to county attorneys on how to deal with corner crossing situations. And as far as I can tell, nothing has been issued to county attorneys in Montana.
And do you foresee Montana corner crossing case going in a similar direction as the Wyoming case?
That's a great question. There's been a lot of chatters, particularly on hunting forums, around this question to see if a similar case could develop in Montana. And I think there was kind of a perfect storm situation that developed in Wyoming where you had a landowner who was very motivated to litigate the charge. Right now it's in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. So, and it takes a lot of money to invest those kinds of legal resources into a case like this. So that was one part of it that made it kind of special. The other part of it that made it kind of special was there's no dispute that those Wyoming hunters stayed on public land physically as they stepped over their ladder to get across the locked corner. And I don't know, I mean, they constructed a special ladder just for this purpose. So that part of the case is not disputed, and it obviously took a fair bit of planning on the part of those hunters to figure that out. And the other thing that I think makes Wyoming kind of unique is they have lots of brass cap corner markers and tons of checkerboard land. We have a lot in Montana. They really have a lot in Wyoming. And in Wyoming, it's very easy to determine the precise location of these corners in a way that's harder in Montana. So we might see something like this in Montana, but that perfect sort of storm where you have lots of interest in litigation on the part of the landowner, where you have this special ladder and an agreement that none of the hunters actually physically stepped on Eshelman's property, and you have this very certain, undisputed property boundary situation. It makes it pretty unique there.
Interesting. And I'm curious, what kind of issues have you run into while trying to report on this issue?
It was difficult getting access to the legal materials that were submitted in a corner crossing case in Montana that happened in 2021. I was trying to find, for instance, a Fish, Wildlife, and Parks warden report where a warden had gone over the claims that had been made against this hunter, this Townsend area hunter. And even just getting the warden report was difficult. So that makes it hard to really figure out the legal standing and how different attorneys are thinking about this issue when it's really hard to get access to charging documents.
Mhm.
I asked the Montana Department of Justice, who litigated this case before deciding to dismiss charges for some of that material, and they said it's considered confidential criminal justice information, and I didn't get access to it, unfortunately.
Now, this is kind of a very broad question, but are there any common misconceptions that you've seen with this subject?
Ooh, that's a good question. Whew. Yes, yes. I think that a lot of hunters and other recreationists, when they're out there on public land and using mapping apps, the most common is probably one called Onyx. And when they're using those apps, I think there's this common conception that that app is using 100% accurate boundary information. And I learned that even Montana Cadastral, which maps property lines and property ownership, sometimes has not 100% accurate information in terms of land ownership. And so as much as you think you might know exactly where you are and if you're standing on private land or public land, I learned that there's a little bit of hairiness or stickiness there.
Yeah. Amanda, I think that's everything that I wanted to tackle. Is there anything that maybe I forgot to ask? Anything you might want to add?
I think that the two things that Montana should be looking out for in the coming months are, number one, a ruling in the Wyoming Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for that Wyoming case. Although we're not in the same appeal circuit, there is this thing where judges can read each other's opinions, and a ruling in one circuit can influence what happens in another circuit. So I think a lot of people are really interested in seeing what happens with that appeal. That'll be a big deal. The other thing I'm really interested to track is what happens with the Montana legislature when lawmakers gavel in January this year, to see if any Montana lawmakers are interested in making corner crossing explicitly legal or explicitly illegal. I should say in the past, bill drafts have been brought for both of those scenarios, not that far apart, and neither of them went very far in the legislature. It's kind of a radioactive issue. So I'll be interested to see if everything that's happened in Wyoming has motivated Montana lawmakers to add a little more clarity to the issue here.